So about 5 to 6 years ago, when I was using the dating apps, and back then there wasn't as much known about them, there wasn't as much content in regards to dating apps, but they were still no good, quite frankly. I mean, you guys know how I feel. It's more about validation and attention for the most part than it is actual dating. But I had matched with a girl who lived about an hour and a half east of the city I'm in. So she was over in central Washington. She decided to actually come over and meet me, which was a lot more convenient at the time. This girl was about 23 years old, and she didn't say anything in her bio or description about being a single mother, didn't have any pictures of her with her, what I found out to be her son. And we hung out. It was all good at first, and she kind of slipped up, whether it was intentional or not, and kind of in passing said something along the lines that she was going to go trick-or-treating with her son later in the fall. And of course, me having just found this out, I asked her, first of all, I asked her where her son was because I thought it was kind of odd that the kid, I believe, was only 4 or 5 years old. Where would he be, right? And she said that he was actually with his biological father, so they had split custody. And then she started kind of slandering the father a little bit and this and that. So again, red flag, this girl's going off on an ex. She clearly hasn't gotten over it. And by the way, the man's still playing a role in her life. But I continued on with the date, and it just went normal, went our own way, and I didn't end up reaching back out to her or anything like that. But what really stood out to me was not only this girl in particular, but when I used to use the dating apps, I would see a lot of girls who are in their 20s. I'm not talking about women in their 30s and 40s. I'm talking girls in their 20s who are single mothers. And of course, we can all look at the data and see the high rate of single motherhood, things I've covered in this video. But what I want to talk about in particular, having gone on a date with one, is why, in my view, men are better off not dating single mothers. And just overall, my thoughts on dating single mothers, the cause of single motherhood and stuff like that. Because many years ago, I had actually gone to school with a lot of people who were raised in single parent, in particular single mother households. And I always felt the kind of sympathy, and I guess when I was more naive, felt like, oh, well, maybe they were just done wrong by the father and stuff like that. But as I got older into adulthood and known people personally who have dealt with divorce and custody battles, from my experience, and I can't generalize and say it's like this for everyone, but in my experience, the fathers were taken out of the kids' lives on complete, really false allegations. Straight up lies, fabrications, things being super exaggerated just to be used against the man. Even in this case, the girl I went on a date with. She's already slandering the father to a guy who she just met. Now imagine that. That sounds like the first kind of woman to me who would go and make some false allegation to a court to try to do some custody battle or divorce and stuff like that. Keep in mind, this girl's probably getting child support. And what I find so messed up is that there's a lot of women like this who end up getting left to single mothers at a young age because they get with these, quite frankly, toxic guys on purpose. They're knowingly doing this because they think that the good men, the decent men, are boring. Like, I even heard of some situation where some dude went on a date with a girl and she said something along the lines of, oh, you're marriage material, that's creepy, that's boring. And that's all the time what we're dealing with. So again, I'm not saying men can't be this, nobody's perfect. I'm not saying that men who are abusive don't exist. But at the same time, you have to understand something. There's a lot of women who are deliberately seeking out men like that. They want to get this kind of phase out in their 20s of not only sleeping around, but again, getting with the toxic guys because it's fun to them for some whatever reason. And then when they hit 30, or when they have a kid, and they want to start to settle down, they go to a decent man, a good man who's worked on themselves, who doesn't do those kind of things, who doesn't sleep around, who doesn't go to clubs, and then they want to get with them as some kind of retirement plan. And that's kind of my problem with a lot of this talk with this single motherhood stuff. Now, let me start by saying this. A kid growing up without both of his biological parents in the home is a travesty, whether it's not a mother being there or not a father being there. It's a travesty. But at the same time, like I had mentioned, I've seen cases where a woman will deliberately put themselves in a position like that. I've known many people throughout the years who were caring, loving fathers. They were not deadbeats. And the mother deliberately took the kid out of the father's life. There's something seriously wrong with that. And even case I've heard where that woman now goes and finds another man. Now, who knows if that man, whether it worked out or not, or if the man's now paying child support, who knows? But that's not someone that I would ever want to date or take seriously. And by the way, when I say take seriously, I mean date. I'm not the kind of person that is for the hookup culture or any of that kind of stuff. Like I said, with women that are getting knocked up, being with the toxic guys, I don't think that's good either. I don't think sleeping around in general is good. But I think it's wrong if a woman's going to do that throughout her prime years, her 20s, and then want to get with a good man who perhaps spent those years working on himself, building his body, developing new skills, finding new hobbies, finding a job, career, line of work, whatever it might have been. There's something really wrong with that. So just as those women in those positions had the choice to go and get knocked up and sleep around and be with the toxic guys and go to the clubs and the raves and stuff like that, us as men have the option to not want to associate with those women. And I don't really see what's wrong with that. Like I've seen some, I don't see as much of it now, but I've seen some cases, maybe it's mostly from women who are single mothers, but trying to shame men who don't have an interest in dating single mothers. I'll tell you something. Everyone can have their preferences. That's regardless of what the circumstance was leading that woman to be a single mother. If a man prefers to not date single mothers, which I personally would advise a man not do, to not date single mothers, if you're asking my opinion, there's nothing at all wrong with that. And you know, another thing that's so problematic, so I'd mentioned in a previous video, I've known a few people who grew up in single mother households, but my best friend in high school actually grew up in a single parent household with a single mother. And they lived around, I think they were probably 3 blocks away from me and my parents. And I've talked about this. I was blessed to have both parents in the household. But I would go over there to hang out a lot of the time, and his mother would be really complaining and slandering the father a lot of the time. Keep in mind that he hadn't seen his father since he was like 5 years old. And what I noticed was that she was almost using her son as like an emotional punching bag, an emotional sponge, someone to take out her kind of frustrations on with the father. Because now I guess he's the man in the home, even though he's not really adulthood even yet. But putting that burden and that stress now on the kid, which I feel like is so wrong. Even when my best friend from high school had reached adulthood, when he was around the age of 18, 19, when he was going to college, I remember his mother had made some comment along the lines of, oh, I don't want you, basically saying that she needs him because she doesn't have a man in the house and she never wants him to move out, and really controlling, right? And I've talked about this where I'm not a believer that you're 18, you need to be out of the house and this and that, and go live your life, and I don't care what happens to you. I don't believe that at all. I think it's good to be close to the family whether you move out or not. I think that you should do those things when you're comfortable and at your own pace. But it wasn't even as much about her son. It was more about herself. It was more about control. And I've heard a lot of people say that they've seen a similar thing when it comes to single mothers. And like I've talked about with a lot of people I've known who have had custody battles and stuff like that, even the data shows an overwhelming majority of the time it is the woman initiating the divorce. So this whole thing with there being supposedly, which I don't know if this is something that's super common, but I have seen this notion that there's so many men that are abandoning the mothers and high single mother rate. I don't think there's as many deadbeat fathers as a lot of people would lead you on to believe. The people I've known, like I said, who are no longer having custody of their kids, those are good, decent men who fought like heck to be able to see their kids. I mean, they were in and out of court multiple times a week. If these people were such deadbeats, why would they be trying to fight for custody of their kids? There's nothing deadbeat about that. Those are good, decent men who wanted to be there to raise their kids. It's extremely problematic. And again, it's absolutely ridiculous and quite frankly incomprehensible why any woman would even voluntarily do something like that. That's serious disdain and manipulation towards the father. And I've seen it happen way too many times. I know this is an extreme example, But I've even personally seen this firsthand. A case of someone who I was really an acquaintance with, but he's someone who a couple of my friends know, they grew up with him. He's like family to them. But a case where a woman who, which by the way, why I'm so big on discernment, because his first mistake was dating a woman who not only was older than him, but was also a single mother. She was older than him by about 10 years. And she had an 8-year-old son at the time they were actually living together. I talked about him a little bit in a previous video, but didn't go into detail about this. But he had gotten her pregnant at some point during the relationship, and she had the kid. And basically the day right then, as soon as she had the kid, she kicked him out of the house. And now she's trying to go after him for child support. So there are some women that will literally have kids on purpose as single mothers to get more money, to get money from the father, to get child support. Now, I like to think that's an extreme case. It's disgusting, quite frankly. But it's something that occurs. And guys, that gets me to my point with this. You don't want to have to feel like you are walking on eggshells, having to worry about false allegations, manipulation. Understand something, right? A lot of cases we've probably all seen involving false allegations and manipulation to take the father out of the home. You don't want to have to walk on eggshells with those kind of predicaments, right? And another thing I've seen is that, which understandably, the woman's priority is going to be her kid. It's going to be her child. If you're going to be in a relationship with a woman like that, I don't think it's going to work out well. I really don't. And especially if there's some kind of split custody where the man is still in life. Now you don't even have to worry about a child who's not your kid, but now another man in the picture. To me, it just sounds like a complete recipe for disaster. Really. It sounds like a complete recipe for disaster. I mean, there were people who were in my school growing up who I wasn't as close with, but someone in particular who had 5 siblings, and they were in a single mother household where the mother was working multiple jobs. The kids had to spend more time at school because they didn't have anyone there to care for them at the house. And I asked this, why would any woman be crazy enough to want to do this deliberately with this kind of fraud allegation stuff? That's just one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of. It's absolutely insane. And like I mentioned too, with the big problem that I see of a lot of women who are single mothers that decided to reject the good men who probably wanted to take them on dates for years, got with the toxic guys, and then are left as single mothers. Now they want to get with the decent men? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I've seen a heck of a lot of cases like that. So, there's this big thing now. I've seen a lot of content on here about whether men should or shouldn't date single mothers. I've seen a lot of good content, but I just thought I would give my view on this because I feel like I could bring some things to the table, having, right, my best friend in high school growing up, being raised by a single mother, having gone on a date with a single mother, having seen a lot of people who are raised by single mothers. And of course, I think it's a travesty. I think it's terrible that there are so many kids that are growing up without both parents in the home, in particular without their biological father in the home. And understandably, it is going to be hard for the woman to find someone who's going to be there as a father figure. Unless they have some kind of older cousin or someone that they can look to as a father figure, it's going to be really hard for the woman, understandably, to find a man who's going to go in there as a stepfather. And I've even heard of cases where stepfathers now, the woman's trying to go after them for child support, for a kid that's not even theirs. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. So if you ask me personally, guys, to put it blunt, I wouldn't do it. I can't do it. I just can't do it in the position I'm in life and what I know. It's just not something I could do. It's not. And it's not something I would advise personally men to do. I wouldn't. Like I said, I think it's a shame. I think it's a horrible thing. I think in an ideal world, the rates of this would not be so high. But unfortunately, in the cases I've seen personally where a woman is a single mother, these were good, decent men that tried fighting for custody, that fought as long as they could, even in some cases, until they were thrown into complete financial ruin where they couldn't afford any more court fees. I'm going to save this for another video where I want to go into detail about a friend of mine's ex-wife and a custody battle he had. But, I mean, this man was in and out of court for 2 years straight. For 2 years straight, multiple days a week. Does that sound like a deadbeat to you? Someone who fought to the very end to try to get the ability to see his kids? There's nothing neglectful. There's nothing abusive. There's nothing wrong about that. And I've seen that a lot of the times. So women like that, they're going to do the same thing to another man. They've already shown their true colors. And unfortunately, like I said, there are still a lot of men who are overlooking those kinds of red flags. That's really the most shameful part in all this. There's someone who's going to go along and not care about any of those things. Right? And what it really comes down to is, I heard this saying, but love without discernment will destroy you. And that certainly is the case here. So, as always, guys, I appreciate you viewing the video. Someone had actually asked me in a comment what my thoughts were on dating single mothers, so I thought I'd give my view on it. And again, appreciate you guys for viewing. Hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.